The cat.
It looks like all the commissioners are here.
Great. Just about one more minute and then we'll get started. Good. It's 6:30, so we will begin. We'll call to order the January 27th meeting of the Santa Barbara County Citizens Independent Redistricting Committee. Ms. Tilton, could you take a roll call for us, please?
District 1, Commissioner Katz.
Present.
District 1, Commissioner Twibell.
Present.
District 2, Commissioner McClintock.
Present.
District 2, Commissioner Turley.
Present.
District 3, Commissioner Bradley.
Present.
District 3, Commissioner Hudley.
Present.
District 4, Commissioner Bray.
Present.
District 4, Commissioner Ochoa.
Present.
District 5, Commissioner Rios.
Present.
Member at Large, Commissioner Olmedo.
Present.
And District 5, Chair Morris.
Present.
All members are present.
Excellent. This is our pattern. We will begin our meeting this evening with public comment. Before we explain that and the procedure and start to take public comment, I want to announce to the commissioners and to the public that based on communication that Mr. Churchill and I have had this evening, we actually have no business to conduct in the closed session, so we will not be doing a closed session this evening. So we have nothing to update on tonight. So with that, Ms. Tilton, you want to introduce public comment and begin to lead us through the list?
Yes, today's meeting is remote, virtual only through the Zoom webinar information identified on the public agenda. The meeting is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the internet at www.countyofsb.org/redistricting.sbc. Public participation during the meeting can only be done through the Zoom webinar link or by calling the phone number provided on the agenda. For those using the Zoom webinar link, please indicate that you wish to speak during public comment by selecting the raise your hand feature, and staff will know to call on you. When called upon, please state your name for the record. Attendees by phone can raise your hand by pressing *9. When it is your turn to speak, we will announce you by caller ID or your phone number. When called upon, please state your name for the record. We reserve the right to mute a microphone for profane, harassing, or offensive language, or for speaking beyond the time limit set. The time limit for public comment is set at 3 minutes. Recordings of the commission meetings, agendas, supplemental materials, and minutes of the commission are available on the internet at the same redistricting webpage cited earlier at www.countyofsb.org/redistricting.sbc.
Very good. Do we have any requests to speak this evening?
I have a request to speak from from Lotte Murty.
Dr. Murty, good evening.
Good evening, Chair Morris and Commissioners. First, I apologize that I'm making public comment on the commission's selection of legal counsel now during general public comment, rather than directly following agenda item 8. However, tonight I am not able to remain in the meeting until agenda item 8 is discussed. So please allow me to say that after reviewing the proposals of the 4 law firms and using the very helpful evaluation matrix to rank them, I believe that Scott Rafferty would best serve the interests and goals of the commission. While I understand that
Ms. Murty?
Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I know there's scheduling issues, but we have to limit. We actually had a complaint to the district attorney's office for letting someone who had to go to work, I believe, a couple of meetings back, comment on an agenda item that was later in the agenda. And the problem is that there may not be people here yet that would want to hear that comment. So I don't really know. There's no real solution. I know there's a lot of city councils that allow it, but technically we need to just have general comments right now that are not on agenda items. I apologize.
And Ms. Murty, if it helps, I would just point out, because we're not going into closed session, I think we're going to get to agenda item 8 pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you very much.
And we'll make sure that we get you in as quick as we can on that.
I appreciate it. I'll hold my comment then. Thank you for letting me know.
Well, we'll have you back in just a minute. Ms. Tilton, is there anybody else with general public comment?
I see no more hands raised for general public comment. We did have written comment submitted. We had written comment submitted from Spencer Brandt regarding Dr. Johnson's expert witness testimony and requesting the RFQ for a demographer. We had a second public comment submitted by Spencer Brandt regarding Nelson Merksemeyer conflict of interest. And we had a late submission submitted by Marguerite Leone of Nelson Merksemeyer, correcting the public comment misunderstanding.
Very well. So we will close the general public comment at this point, and bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, is there anybody that wishes to make a motion on item 3, or are we leaving that one again this evening for future action? Seeing no motion, we will move on to disclosure of ex parte communications. Is there any member of the commission who has an item to report tonight?
I do.
Commissioner Rios.
Yes, I was reached out to by Patricia Solorio from the Fund for Santa Barbara. She asked if we had discussed a timeline already and a plan for our rollout of like engagement of the community. And I told her that at this time it was not on our agenda, and that, you know, we will notify the public in our agenda once we are there.
Very well. Anybody else? Commissioner Katz.
This might be ex parte, so I'll make sure it is or isn't. You know, I was doing a vaccination clinic yesterday, and one of the persons that I screened, it works for a housing program. And I said, I introduced myself as a commissioner and asked if I could reach her at another, this is sort of for SROs in Santa Barbara, if I could contact her later.
Very well.
That's it.
Great. And anybody else have anything? I'll report that I was approached by a reporter for the Santa Maria Sun with a question about the status of NDC's contract. I reported to her that the action we had taken at our last meeting, and that seemed to be all she needed to know. So, Mr. Bray.
Chair Morris, that leaves a question that I had. If we are contacted by a member of the media, are you the official spokesperson that we should refer them to?
I think you could refer them to me, or you could refer them to maybe Ms. Tilton, and as our staff representative. Commissioner Churchwell or Mr. Churchwell, you might want to clarify. Individual commissioners can state their personal opinion. They just can't speak on behalf of. They can't make it sound like an official response. Is that
correct? So caution is the word, right? And maybe putting it, if you do want to say something that your views on things are fine, I would do it in an email so nobody can misquote you or the notes get messed up. It's kind of a good practice. But generally for the commission, I would just refer those to the chair or to Ms. Tilton. That's either way is fine.
And just as in my case, when I sent her the response by email, I also copied the redistricting @ email address so that it became part of the record as well. I don't know that that's necessary, but it seemed like something that protected me. So that was my approach there. Okay, I think we've got everybody in on that. We are going to move then we're going to skip items 5, 6, and 7 because there's nothing to report out tonight. Hopefully we'll have some more to talk about on Monday, but we don't tonight. So that brings us to item number 8, which is discussion, deliberation, and possible action regarding selecting independent legal counsel. And I think what I'd like to do tonight is take public comment first before we have a commission discussion about process. I would just remind the public that we are not intending tonight to select a counsel. We are in the outcome tonight, we hope, is to determine which, if any, of the applicants will be invited for an interview with the commission on Monday night. So with that framework, Ms. Tilton, is there anybody who would like to make a comment? I'm sure we have at least one.
Yes, we have Lee Heller, and I see that Lata Murthy is still on attending. So yes, I don't know if you want to take Lata Murthy since she was cut off earlier, or. I think if we can, that seems like a good idea. If we can, okay. I know Ms. Heller, is quick on the thumb, but I think she'll forgive us if we let Dr. Murthy finish her comment. Okay, we'll take Lata Murthy followed by Lee Heller. Welcome back, Dr. Murthy.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to make public comment on this at this time. So now with the understanding that the public's providing recommendations on interviews, not the selection, I would recommend interviewing all the firms except Nielsen Merksimer, where I do see some obvious conflicts of interest. And so I would hope that they would not be among the choices for firms to interview. And thank you very much for allowing me to comment on this.
Our pleasure. Thanks for joining us tonight. Now we'll take Ms. Heller. Good evening.
Chair Morris and commissioners, it's okay. I'm okay with Dr. Murthy speaking in front of me, although it does break my streak, and that's very hard. And how nice to be moving so quickly through your agenda tonight, and hopefully it'll be a short evening. And I do understand that the goal tonight is to narrow down to the firms you want to interview. It's not clear to me if you're going to interview 2 or 3. And I did try to apply the same criteria that you are all using. I do again want to pick up on what was in the public comment from Spencer Brandt as an exclusion of Nielsen Merksimer. I don't know if most of you know this, but that firm was originally the firm that the county was going to contract with to provide you with counsel. And then this conflict, and you can see these filings because one of their associates who would be assigned to the commission has acted as the treasurer for PACs that have donated to county supervisors. So that's in conflict with your conflict of interest code, which you adopted, which ties commissioner conflicts of interest to anybody participating with your commission. So those conflicts, as far as I'm concerned, disqualify them. But you have 3 other great choices. So this is pretty exciting. I was really impressed with the credentials of all of these firms. The balancing act was, on the one hand, Scott Rafferty, who has clearly extensive experience and pretty impressive credentials, and also the best pricing, but doesn't bring this heavy duty team with him. And then the other extreme that I was impressed by was, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting, it's Wutcher is the other partner. I'm forgetting the name of the other one. Very high powered, but of course also potentially the priciest. And one thing that occurred to me is that you could hire Scott Rafferty, who also does have litigation experience, but I guess if you needed a litigation firm, which it seems to me what Wutcher does, you could reach out. And what I would say is, let's not need a litigation firm. Let's get you a good lawyer who advises you well so that there are no more of these hiccups that you've dealt with and you don't have to deal with litigation. So to me, those look like the two best choices. I'm not dissing Sutton, but those seem to me to be the strongest. I was concerned with Sutton, as I referenced last time, that they wanted to assign all of these junior lawyers. And I did mention that when you get out of law school, you don't really know anything about the practice of law. So that would be my input, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Philip Seymour, followed by William Conlon.
Good evening, Mr. Seymour.
Good evening. Phil Seymour again. I'm a retired attorney. I did get a chance to look at the submittals by the 4 firms. And I also share Ms. Heller's and other people's concerns about the conflict of interest issues surrounding the Nielsen firm. I mean, one, you have a straightforward disqualification under the plain language of the ordinance. You cannot hire an independent firm or a consultant that has members or a member that has been an officer of an organization who's made political contributions for a county elective office. And documentation I've seen indicates that at least one member of that firm does have that disqualification. That should be end of story. There's some other concerns about that firm though. They have requested in their proposal that the county agree to effectively waive all conflict of interests under this is the kind of conflict of interest that attorneys have. You know, basic principle is you cannot represent people with opposing interests. And the reason for that is you can't be completely loyal to one client if you have another client who, you know, is in opposition to them. Now, of course, they've committed they would not, you know, take on another client who was suing you or anything. But that's not the only possible issue you could have. They are reserving the right to represent some client who is suing the county, and it could be over a land use issue, could be an election issue unrelated to your work. I think that's an appearance you don't want to risk creating. It's just not, it's not going to inspire confidence if the attorneys that are advising this body are at the same time in conflict with the county on other issues. Of the other firms, you know, one thing about being a lawyer is I've always been embarrassed by how much people get charged by lawyers. It's unfortunate. I think you can get competent counsel without paying top dollar. And if it goes to litigation, that's a different issue. You might want to reserve the option of bringing in outside litigation counsel if you do wind up in that situation. But for just everyday advice, 90% of the time, this is not rocket science. It's routine administrative law, applying the standards in the elections code. I would, however, consider the level of experience of the people you're hiring, because although 90% of it is routine, you don't want to be in that situation where an odd question comes up in a meeting and you have somebody who may be very brilliant, could research the issue and come back with a great answer, but can't answer the question on the spot. That's the one thing experience gives you, an accumulated knowledge and ability to respond and and also in every area of law, there's the statutes, there's the case law, and then there's just, sort of the look and feel that goes, being able to look for practical solutions, anticipate how judges might rule. I mean, that's, you can never be sure about that, but experience does matter. So I would take those into that factor into consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The next speaker is William Conlon, followed by Gail Teton-Landis.
Good evening, Mr. Conlon.
Chair Morris, Commissioners, William Conlon from District 4. Good evening, and I'm glad to see everyone is staying safe, dry, and with electricity. I am truly confounded by Nielsen Merksheimer even being considered for this position, given the conflict of interest issue. This problem has already been rightfully raised by Mr. Brandt in his written comments and by Dr. Murdy, Ms. Heller, and Mr. Seymour just now. I'm sure there are many others who feel the same way. You have 3 qualified candidates who would not require a conflict of interest waiver. Of those, I would like to personally speak in favor of Scott Rafferty, having the best combination of being qualified and cost effective. I believe that the work of this commission is critical. It is why I initially put my name in contention and why I'm sticking with you all for the long haul. This commission's work will result in highly consequential decisions for our region and all those who live in it. With 2 confirmed resignations, the potential for 2 lawsuits, and all the issues regarding legal and demographic, I just have to ask, does this commission really want more trouble, legal or otherwise? Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Gail Teton-Landis, followed by Christian Alonso.
Good evening, Ms. Teton-Landis.
Good evening, everybody. And I echo the glad you're all have electricity and staying dry. As you have heard from several people before me, Nielsen Merksheimer seems to have conflicts. So I'm looking, I've spent some time looking at the other 3 firms. The Sutton Law Firm concerns me because it looks as if to keep costs down, they would use the work, their work with the commission. It looks like they would be using young, potentially inexperienced attorneys. So that gave me some pause. Stromwasser and Wucher look excellent, but they are pricey. And I don't really know if their fees fit in the budget of the commission. And that leaves Scott Rafferty, who seems to have experience and sort of a good fee structure. So I'm thinking that Wucher and Rafferty might be the best fit. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
The next speaker is Christian Alonso, followed by Andy Caldwell.
Good evening, Mr. Alonso.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Thanks so much for your time tonight. My name is Christian Alonso from District 1. I've been listening along, and I have to say that it seems like it would make sense to eliminate consideration of Nielsen. No waiver should be given for the conflict of interest that's been identified here in public comment. And I think the whole point of the commission is independence. And when the rules specifically prohibit this type of financial activity by the participants, it just seems Nielsen shouldn't be on any list of firms that the commission might interview. And it doesn't seem like there need to be interviews here when there are several other qualified applicants. And so when you look at the other 3 proposals, we have a bunch of qualified staff and relevant experience among all of those. Public comment on Monday night, someone said experience matters. And I think that when we're considering these 3, I have some concerns about the Sutton firm and their suggestions of using multiple associates who may have been out of law school or admitted to the bar for a really short period of time. So I think when we take that into consideration, we want to look at Scott Rafferty and Stromwasser and Wucher. Their proposals seem the best in terms of the overall knowledge and experience, and they don't appear to have any of these conflicts of interest. So there's a big price differential here as well. Some of the other commenters have brought up, and I guess I would just suggest interviewing these 2 as the best proposals and then determining which of these seem like the best fit and the best value. So maybe it would be possible to retain Scott Rafferty, whose focus is on administrative law rather than litigation, and have the option of hiring a second firm for litigation if necessary. I also, if Mr. Rafferty advises you well and the commission does its job correctly, you shouldn't need another litigator. So that I think is something you all should consider.
Thank you, sir.
The next request to speak is Andy Caldwell, followed by Spencer Brandt.
Good evening, Mr. Caldwell.
Good evening, Chair Morris, members of the commission. I'm Andy Caldwell, representing CoLab. I represent a coalition of labor, agriculture, and business. We have 4 unions on our board: agriculture, manufacturing, and industry. So we have a mix of people from all parties in our organization. We've been involved in redistricting before, and in fact, we ended up suing the county one time over redistricting because we felt like they violated the principles that will be guiding you in doing those maps. Well, back then, Woocher was the firm that the county hired against a citizens group on defending redistricting. Totally competent attorney as far as that goes. And we've been in lawsuits with Phil Seymour too, and he's a darn good attorney. But I want to bring up something that's not clear to me. So Spencer Brandt, for instance, is a Democratic Party official in Santa Barbara County. He has a partisan interest in this, and that's all fine and good. He's not on your commission, but he's got a partisan interest. It begs the question, did all 4 of the attorneys' firms get equally vetted independently of the people that are complaining to you tonight? I couldn't tell from the public record that there was an independent vetting of all the attorneys and the staff members of these firms. Because I know that Nielsen, and I've never met Nielsen or been involved with their organization, they were targeted early on, and probably because in some cases they have represented clients or boards or parties that leaned conservative. So I understand that, but I'm looking to you to be completely independent and completely objective. So instead of taking public comment that these guys have a conflict or one of their attorneys has a conflict, it begs the question, how well were the other attorney firms vetted? And I'm hoping that it's good to have public comment, but it's, about verification. Trust and verify, I think is the phrase. And I'm hoping that you guys will, or having somebody at the county counsel's office or somebody to go through each of the firms on an equal footing. And that could be something that is added to your checklist as far as were they all vetted equally versus, I don't like it when people in public comment say, well, this person's this and this person's that, without really offering the proof and or the balance that they applied the same test to other people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker is Spencer Brandt, followed by Scosa.
Good evening, Mr. Brandt.
Commissioners, thanks for allowing me to speak here today. I think, as you know, I sent you a letter this week, and the impetus for that really was I started looking into this stuff because I'd been watching the Board of Supervisors hearing on October 20th when some of these concerns were raised, and was kind of left scratching my head that it seemed like this firm had not only resubmitted a proposal when they somewhat clearly had a conflict, but also that they were now asking for a very specific carve out from filing the same Form 700s and disclosing that information that you all do as commissioners and that your staff does and that your current legal counsel does. So just as to frame it and be specific, in 2020, in the month of February, Ms. Gibson signed the check for Supervisor Lavanino's reelection committee to the tune of $1,500. And in May of 2019, signed a check to Supervisor Nelson's campaign committee to the tune of $1,000. Now that Ms. Gibson and her affiliated committees have political leanings is really none of my business. As you've heard tonight from Mr. Caldwell, I too am a registered member of a political party, but I am also not putting my hat in the ring to be your legal counsel. And you should all be thankful for that, because I don't think that I would be able to understand the breadth and depth of all of the legal challenges and ins and outs that you all and your legal counsel is going to deal with throughout this process. So I just encourage you, you've got 3 firms that all seem qualified and don't have conflicts to draw upon them and ask Nielsen to step out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker is Scoza.
Good evening. Are you, can you, it looks like you may be muted. Can you unmute your connection? And
it's the identifier SCOSSA.
I have asked to unmute on a few occasions and nothing is happening.
Okay, perhaps they've had to step away from their camera or their computer for a while. Let's move on. Who's next?
Okay, I am not seeing any other hands raised at this time.
Very well, then we will close that part of the public comment and bring it back. I do want to just make one quick notation. I know that the commissioners received a late public comment submission from, I'm going to get the name right, Marguerite Leone from the Nielsen Merksimer firm. And I don't know if that has been posted to the website yet, but I know that it was sent to the commissioners. And I just would note that they provided in that letter some clarification from their perspective around this, specifically the issue of the political action committee that was referenced. And Mr. Churchwell, I'd like to maybe ask if you could explain just a little bit the legal role that they appear to have played in that organization.
Yes, so the firms like the ones that have applied, my firm, I mean, that do political laws, we now call it, it used to be called election law, and maybe then campaign finance law came in right after Watergate, and we just call it political law. So what political law firms do, a lot of their work is filing disclosure reports for their clients. So it's really more accounting than it is legal work, to be honest, very intense accounting work. And basically you are just ensuring that all of the money in and out for campaign finance, for lobbying, sometimes the commissioners, you know, Form 700s, assist with those. And in the campaign finance world, all of the governmental entities, whether federal, state, or local, require that the filer have a treasurer. So it's a common misconception. What we heard tonight is that they think that this person is an officer of the organization, and they're not. They are, usually this is it could be a paralegal, it could be an attorney, but typically it's neither. I mean, you can be some of the best treasurers in the state and even federal treasurers that I know have a high school education, have 2 years of community college. They just are really good at this task. So they're not officers of they're not what is intended by the ordinance, which is someone like the president, secretary, treasurer of an organization, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit. I guess the best words to use are professional treasurer. But this, I can't blame anyone who commented because it's very confusing. I mean, they sign as treasurer, and every one of these organizations already has a treasurer, right? Who is an officer of that entity. And it's just that's just the word that the Fair Political Practice Commission or the Federal Election Commission came up with. Maybe there should have been, political report specialist, or I can think of a ton of other ways what you could call this person other than treasurer. But so I just I thank you for the opportunity to clear that up, because I don't know any of the facts. I don't want to say I do. I think we would have to hear from that firm. And I will say that the conflict of interest code, I think they pointed out in their letter that was received today, that was adopted after they submitted their proposal. And so we'll have to kind of look at that as kind of how does that affect anything. But anyway, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to clear that up about treasurer versus professional treasurer.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to bring this back to the commission for discussion and recommendations as to where you all want to go next regarding how we move the selection process forward. So is there anybody that wants to kind of start us off? Mr. Olmedo.
Yes, sir, Commissioner. Thank you very much. So I guess, going under the assumption that, everything was vetted through the county, and appreciate all the public comment. When I was kind of looking at the submittals and going off of the sheet, I mean, the two big things, there's a lot of experience and knowledge, really, money matters to me. So just looking at the legal fees, that was a big part really that I was looking at. And really for Nielsen, there was, the 200 cap, but, completely open on litigation. Stormwasser had a 300 cap. Mr. Rafferty had a 100 cap. And then just the personnel, you got maybe a little more robust with Stormwasser Wucher, maybe a little less with Mr. Rafferty, but just for me, it came down to that decision. Everyone seems to have lots of experience on that money piece. I would be interested in interviewing Stormwasser Wucher and Mr. Rafferty. That's just kind of from my perspective. Thank you.
Commissioner Bradley.
I'd like to echo what Commissioner Olmedo has just said. I think that part of our trust in this commission is to try and save our taxpayers money. And if I were looking at this as a, say, business bid, I would certainly want to look at a balance between what is affordable and what is competent and prepared. And I feel like the two choices that Commissioner Olmedo just outlined, Sturmwasser, Wucher, and Nielsen Merksheimer being a little too expensive, but I think Sturmwasser, Wucher probably shows a little bit, I think, a better preparation for what we might need to do and will do. And I think Scott Rafferty also shows a good readiness. So I'd like to recommend that we interview both Sturmwasser, Wucher, and Scott Rafferty.
Okay. Commissioner Bray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, just questions more than comment. Do we have a legal budget within which we must operate? And
it's been communicated to us yet, so
it has.
Maybe Miss Anderson's waking up her camera. Maybe she'd like to answer that question.
I certainly could, Chair Morris. The county has set aside for the county budget in the 2021 year is about $500,000. That has to cover all of the professional services, outreach efforts, and other costs that are associated to the redistricting effort. Right now, just for by way of an example, County Council had a not to exceed of $100,000 for the previous two legal counsel contracts with an hourly rate. So just to kind of keep that in mind. At this point, we have about dedicated about 210,000 out of that 500,000 towards legal counsel specifically. So hopefully that'll help.
Thank you. Second question is, one of the commenters mentioned political contributions to two separate supervisors, and I found that a little interesting. I wonder if Mr. Churchwell had any opinions on that so far as conflict.
I don't have any personal knowledge. I believe, again, if I'm just going from the letter we received, that again was from a company that's what we call a major donor. Once you give $10,000 to state and local candidates and ballot measures in California, you have to file what we call a Form 461, a major donor report. And so I believe the firm in the letter says all they did was file those reports. They did not make any contributions to those people. The law firm.
Thank you.
Anything else there, Commissioner Bray, or do we get your?
That was my questions for now.
Good. Who's next? Where are we? Commissioner Bradley.
I have a question, please, for Nancy Anderson. Ms. Anderson, do we have any idea, before seating a Citizens Commission for redistricting, do we have any idea what it cost us in previous years to do redistricting with county staff and with the Board of Supervisors?
You know, that's a very good question, Commissioner. No, because that would have just been absorbed within the department's budget. I would have to ask them if they kept records 10 years ago in regard to that. So we don't have outside counsel that was specifically identified. Otherwise, you know, that would be a helpful comparison, but unfortunately we don't have that.
Would it be possible to get a ballpark figure in time for our next meeting?
I can ask them of what they have available or what they could make available. And if it's readily available, I'm sure they'd be willing to share, but I can certainly ask that question to them.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, and then I'm going to go to Commissioner Turley after your comments, Doug.
Just one brief thing. We did manage to get from San Diego's commission their very, very ballpark budget that may be helpful on this question. So their budget for San Diego County, which again is over 4 million people, much larger county, is $750,000 for the project. And similarly to what Ms. Anderson was just talking about, they have kind of preliminarily allocated $150,000 of that to the legal services contract that they've already signed with Nielsen Merksmer. So just for comparisons, you have some ballparks. A lot of the costs are constant regardless of size. So 500 for Santa Barbara relative to 750 is more or less equivalent.
Very good. Commissioner Turley.
Yes, I have two parts. One, if Ms. Anderson could speak to whether or not our demographic services are included within that 500,000, and yes. Two, to state, yes, they are. Yes. Okay. And do we have an idea of how much that contract is?
Yeah, so we have a not to exceed of 100,000 on demographic and administrative services.
Great, that's very helpful, thank you. And then the second aspect is that I think given the clarification from Nielsen Merksmer and our conversation tonight, I think that their proposal is an interesting one and we should also consider it for interview.
Very good. Do you have any other are they the only one you want to interview?
I also agree with Commissioner Bradley and Almeida.
The Stonewatcher, Woocher, and Rafferty you would invite as well. Okay, thank you. Keep it a little tally. Commissioner Hudley, and then Commissioner Ochoa after him.
All right, thank you. So yes, I'm gonna echo. I think definitely. You know, I'm an accountant, so definitely cost efficiency is always in the beginning of my mind. So for me, you know, that was kind of like a strike against Nielsen Merksmer for me, because I felt like even though their cap rates were pretty good, I mean, outside of the other things that have already been mentioned, I just not including the litigation in the fact that we're potentially facing litigation. and could potentially face litigation down the road whenever a map is drawn, was very concerning. And so, you know, and then obviously for Sutton, I agree that I didn't feel that, I didn't see the experience that I was hoping to see for them. So, so at this point, my two people that I would say we should interview is Mr. Rafferty. Very concerned that he's a one-man shop. I like teams and I like, you know, something with some depth to it. But I agree, you know, cost efficiency, he's right on the money. So I don't want to dismiss, you know, the person, you know, trying to make their way here. So I say, give them a shot. And then obviously, you know, Strumwasser and Wucher, I think is a very strong firm, and they will offer everything. And yes, I understand that they are a premium, but I would also argue that at that cap rate, that's only if we actually need that many hours, right? I mean, that is to not exceed. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we're going to spend. So it's just really a matter of like how much work they have to do. So, but they are, you know, well credentialed and I think a very strong contender. So that would be my two.
Good. Commissioner Ochoa, and then Commissioner Katz following, and then Commissioner Rios.
I'm going to echo Commissioner Hudley and the public comment today and say that as I was ranking, my top two were Mr. Rafferty as the second one and Strumwasser Wucher as the first.
Commissioner Katz and then Commissioner Rios.
You know, it's funny. Can you hear me?
Okay.
You can hear me.
Yes,
my two firms were Strumwasser Wucher and Scott Rafferty. And even though I gave very high scores to Nielsen Merksimer, I had some concern about what we had been hearing. This is before I read their letter and Miss Leone's letter. And then I was looking at, I mean, it was an intense submission with, I thought, hundreds of pages, and it was very hard to weed through it. But I did look at a couple of the cases that they argued, and I don't, you know, I think their position had been supporting at large, and I could very well be wrong about this, but at large candidates as opposed to candidates that represent the district and that represent communities of interest. And so that would be my quest. I don't know if that's an appropriate question, but I wondered about that because we're working in the other direction, I think, in which we're trying to find good representation or fair representation for different communities of interest and ethnic groups. So my choice really is Strumwasser Wucher and Scott Rafferty. And I'm completely open to Nielsen Merksimer if we can ask some of those questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Rios.
Yes, I think similar to everyone here, I think I was concerned most with Nielsen just because of, you know, that conflict of interest and, you know, considering everything we're going through and just, you know, open to litigation, like so just keeping that was something I had to keep in mind myself when looking at these decisions and who they had represented. And I mean, just like everybody else, Rafferty, I think, you know, they bring one person to the team, but really looking at their cases to see, you know, what that was like, how do they handle a big county, and really, you know, asking them those questions of how they will handle that. I think that will be important. That will give us insight on, can they support us, even if it's just like a one-man show, or what do they bring to the table? And again, the second one, Strumwasser and Wucher, I mean, everybody has said it. They're a little more expensive, but again, I think if they bring everything that we need to the table, considering our circumstances and just everything that we need, you know, from the administrative side to the litigation side. I think I'd be open to bringing both on to hear what they have to, you know, have to say.
So again, I'm sorry, tell me again, you would recommend which firms?
Strumwasser, I cannot say it. I had to like Strumwasser and Wucher, excuse me, and Rafferty.
Very good. Commissioner Twibell, Commissioner McClintock, any feedback from either of you? Commissioner Twibell, and then Commissioner McClintock.
You know, I think I just have one recommendation, and that would be Strumwasser and Wucher. I looked at the experience notes, and I'm wondering how important it is if, like Scott Rafferty, has never been represented redistricting for either a city or a county. And I don't know what the other commissioners feel about that experience. So I just have the one recommendation.
Okay. Mr. McClintock.
My only concern, I guess, would be with Sutton for the reasons that have been brought up, that they've you know, offered up a junior attorney to lead their work. So I would not recommend interviewing Sutton, but the other three, for various reasons that have been brought up, I'd be happy to interview.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Bray, you asked some questions, but didn't maybe give a recommendation. That's okay, but I want to give you a chance to if you have a recommendation or a preference.
Thank you. Just one question, and then my recommendations. I did not seem to find a not to exceed amount for Strumwasser. Was there a not to exceed amount in their proposal? Did I just miss it?
No, I didn't see it either.
I thought I saw something referencing a 300,000.
I think you're talking about Sutton. Yeah, Sutton did not. Strumwasser Wucher does. Yeah, not to exceed 300 cap, but Sutton Law Firm did not provide that. They only provided legal fees, which is one of the reasons why I kind of marked them down on that, because it was wide open.
And so it was 300
or less.
3,000 not to exceed for, okay, thank you. My concern with Scott Rafferty is it appears that he's a one-person shop. Yes. Doesn't mean that he doesn't bring in assistants and counsel, but that was a little concerning to me, and it didn't seem like he had a lot of experience in districting work. Strumwasser, I thought, was a strong candidate. I agree with pretty much everybody else. With Sutton, I thought that junior attorneys, I was not really comfortable with that. Nielsen, I thought, had the most varied background in districting work and who they have represented. The conflicts are a concern, but having said that, I'd still like to hear what they have to say.
But you'd invite the three?
Yes.
Yeah. So as I reviewed these, let me take them in kind of reverse order. The Sutton Law Firm, I was very ambivalent. I don't think I read it as strongly as that all the work would be done by junior folks. I think they kind of said, senior attorneys will be the guys that will show up at your meetings and give you advice in the moment, but stuff we can pawn off to save you some money, we'll try and do that. But there were other concerns there, not offering a not to exceed, some of those kinds of things. I was very ambivalent about their fees. Strumwasser and Wucher, I frankly am concerned about their rate structure. My assumption is their goal is to bill to the cap, and whichever firm we choose, the number of hours are probably the same, and I'd rather pay $300 an hour than $575 if that's possible. But I probably would want to have that conversation with them, so I think it's worth inviting them in to talk about whether that number is negotiable further as part of that conversation. I think the Nielsen Merck-Zimmer group is the most experienced at the work we need done. I think they, by my read, have represented a more balanced set of clientele. My sense is that, at least my read on Strumwasser Wucher, is their clientele tends to be more ideological, you know, they tend to represent folks on one side of the ledger, at least in my read. So I have a lot of concern about Scott Rafferty's application, not just because he's a one-man operation, but quite frankly, I think he presents more as an advocate. I think he'd have an opinion, and he probably ought to be providing testimony to the commission. I don't see him as somebody that in his application really gave me confidence that he could provide good procedural advice around things like the Brown Act and the ethics rules and, ex parte communications. That I don't see that as his passion or his expertise. I think he's an advocate around voting rights. And I think that's wonderful that he's built that career. I don't think it's the fit for the work we need done inside the commission. Again, if he wants to come and provide testimony, it would probably be very interesting. So for those reasons, I would be comfortable in inviting Nielsen and Strumwasser. I don't think I would invite the other two. So that's, anyway, those are my kind of 2 cents worth that I'll throw on the table. And then just, I'd be open to some additional conversation or recommendations. And at some point, somebody probably ought to put a motion on the table so we can, start to whittle down some choices. But any additional, anybody thought of something since they said their thing, and any additional comments or input? Mr. Johnson, and then we'll go to Commissioner Twibell after Mr. Johnson.
Very briefly, just drawing a little bit on lessons from the commission's experience so far. I think the kind of original 5 that did the interviews for the second group would probably agree with me that some of those interviews were surprising. And I think the original 5 may have wished they had done more interviews in that first round. So as you're looking at this, just drawing from that experience, I might suggest if you're on the fence about something, it's probably better to interview them than to cut it off at this point.
Commissioner Twibell and then Commissioner Turley.
I was just going to ask about negotiating prices. And does the commission have the right to do that, or does that go to the county? I don't understand that part.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we talked a little bit about that earlier at our last meeting. The negotiation is at the commission level. We will make a recommendation to the county. I don't know that we've determined how that gets done. I would presume based on our pattern to date, it's probably a subcommittee, but we haven't talked about who does that and what that process looks like, but it is at it is on us to do. Okay. Was that your full question?
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Turley, I think, was next, and then I saw Commissioner Rios.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make a point and say that Scott Rafferty in his application did reference working with Doug Johnson. So I don't know if this is a personnel issue that we need to talk about in closed session, but Doug may have some feedback there.
Sure, happy to clarify. I actually know a number of the attorneys that are bidding on this as well. Scott and I consider as friends, respect him. He was on the plaintiff side in all those jurisdictions, and NDC doesn't do plaintiff side work. So I know him, and we work together from opposite sides. As was mentioned earlier, he's only been on the plaintiff side.
And yet he said very nice things about you. So
yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Commissioner Rios.
Yeah, I think I'm in a, I can't decide mentality right now. And so it did speak to me where someone said that, it's good to interview more than just, say we only interview 2, but what about the third one? So I'm really honestly even open to hearing all of them, even though we're concerned about, Sutton, we're concerned about Nielsen. I just think that we all have questions that could very well be addressed in the interviews. And then, me, myself can better make my mind up better if I hear from all 4. So I'm putting that out there now. I'm open to hearing from all 4.
Great, thank you. Commissioner McClintock, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I would.
And then I'll go to Commissioner Hudley next.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with Commissioner Rios. I don't see any real cost in interviewing all of them. I know that a lot of concerns have been raised about Sutton and Nielsen for different reasons. But you know, when I was reading Nielsen materials, I was just struck by how deep their experience was, and how, you know, I think that was the only application that mentioned experience with tribal governments, something that could potentially be useful for us. So yeah, I just think it would be great to get all these different firms together with us, so we can ask some very pointed questions and get some clarification on any of our concerns.
Good. Commissioner Hudley.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, me personally, I don't think we need to interview all of them. I really think, I mean, from what I've heard, the consensus is that Sutton is not really fitting what we're looking for. So I would, you know, say that we should just eliminate them, and then focus on the 3 that's remaining. Because I've heard kind of a balance of argument for Nielsen, and I mean, you know, I believe in transparency. I believe in allowing people to kind of, you know, defend themselves in a, you know, I know we're not a court of law, but I think, you know, if they're being attacked from, you know, public concern, I mean, I think we should at least give them the opportunity to, you know, defend themselves and lay their case out. But, you know, but I think everyone's also made a pretty strong case for Mr. Rafferty and Strohmeyer as well, Wucher. And so, you know, I'm open for all 3, you know, for Nielsen, Wucher, and Mr. Rafferty to interview, with eliminating Sutton is kind of where I'm at right now.
Mr. Curley.
Yeah, with that, I'd like to make a motion to offer interviews to Stromwasser, Wucher, Rafferty, and Nielsen Merksimer.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Curley, second by Commissioner Olmedo. Let me make sure I got it right, to invite for interviews of the 3 firms, right? Nielsen, Merksimer, Stromwasser, Wucher, and Rafferty.
That's correct.
Okay. Any further discussion now that there's a formal motion on the table? Mr. McClintock.
I'd just like to reiterate what I think it was you, Chair Morris, I can't remember who mentioned this earlier, that even though, you know, a lot of our concerns about Sutton is that there's been this suggestion that there's going to be a junior attorney leading the whole thing for them. That might have been their way of sort of saying, look, you know, there's going to be a less expensive person who's kind of at your disposal. But they talk about Brad Hertz, who has 32 years of experience, who's going to be part of the process at their disposal to you know, come in when needed. So I don't know. I think we might all have been misreading this application as though this is a junior, you know, individual that's going to be in charge and running the show. And I just like the idea of getting them to the table so they can articulate that a little bit more, explain what they're thinking.
Very good. Commissioner Curley, Olmedo, and then Hudley.
Yeah, I didn't mention this earlier, but my biggest objection with, which, you know, in the grand scheme of things is not really a huge objection, with Sutton was that they don't have any experience in litigation for redistricting or voting rights. So for me, that was the biggest deciding factor on my end. But again, I'm not completely opposed to interviewing them. I think that transparency is absolutely what we're here for.
Yes, sir. I agree with Commissioner McClintock regarding the experience. My issue wasn't the experience. My issue was, you know, when they submitted the proposal, there was no cap on the legal fees, right? As opposed to, and in talking with Mr. Churchwell, right? I mean, you look at what everyone else submitted. Once you submitted, that's it. It's go time, right? So that's why I would say that there's consequences to that, especially when we're talking about legal fees, public institution, right? Limited budget. So that was my recommendation. Why I would leave them off.
Mr. Hudley?
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Commissioner Turley. I mean, it pretty much says it in their proposal that they have, you know, no experience in redistricting and, voting rights. So, I mean, on top of, like, Commissioner Almeida said, the fact that they basically said, we have no idea what our fees are going to be because we've never actually done this before. So, so to me, that those two things I just could not overlook, and that's why I suggested.
Okay. Any other comments before we take a vote? Very well. So to reiterate, the motion on the table is to invite for interviews Nielsen, Merksimer, Stromwasser, Wucher, and Scott Rafferty. Mr. Tilton, before you take a roll, can I just ask you to clarify? I know you reached out to all the firms to confirm their availability for Monday. Any concerns from that end?
I heard back from all of them and all of them are available.
Excellent. With that, would you please conduct the roll call?
Commissioner Katz?
Aye.
Commissioner Twyvell? I didn't hear. Commissioner Twyvell, was that an aye?
Commissioner Twyvell, can you hear us? We're not hearing you at the moment.
Twyvell? Aye.
There we go.
Is it? I thought you said a different name. I'm sorry.
No worries.
McClintock?
Aye.
Commissioner Turley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley?
Aye.
Commissioner Hudley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bray?
Aye.
Commissioner Ochoa?
Aye.
Chair Morris?
Aye.
Commissioner Rios?
Aye.
And Member at Large Olmedo?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
So commissioners, let's take just a minute and talk about how we want to structure this for our meeting next Monday. In the past, when we have done interviews, we've asked a team of folks to put together some standard questions. I'm wondering if that's appropriate for this one, because it seems like there are a number of individual questions that are probably unique to individual applications. And while we run the risk of maybe it being a longer conversation, I wonder if we structure this differently this time and perhaps just kind of go through in order and let each commissioner ask whatever question they feel is necessary, perhaps with the encouragement that if it's been asked before you get your turn, we acknowledge that and not repeat it, but seek clarity where you need to and kind of work through, but open to suggestions. Commissioner McClintock.
I'm wondering if we can just have a shared Google Doc where we can all kind of write questions for each of the firms, and if they're repetitive, then we don't have to worry about asking them again. But if we all just had an idea of the kinds of questions that we could ask.
Yep. So let me turn to our legal guru here, and given the posting time frame and other requirements, what are our options here?
So this is not required to even be, you're hiring, this is a service contract, doesn't have to be competitively bid at all. And I want everyone to understand, we will have a closed session on the agenda for this, because the reason the legislature has that, even for outside legal counsel, contract counsel instead, as well as in-house, is you might have to say some things that are pretty difficult, pro and con, right? That just isn't appropriate personnel stuff for open session. So in terms of the questions, you could, there's no requirement in any law that we give them an advance copy. You could just spring it on them like you might do at wherever you work. So it's really just kind of up to the commission. Do you want, I think it would speed things up to do what we call an open book exam, right? I always like those personally, but whatever. Don't know about you. For those of you who are professors, probably have a better idea on that. But so yeah, there's no, in other words, there's no time, there's no deadline. If you want to give them the questions, you could do it like maybe 24 hours before, something like that.
Problem with that is that puts us on a Sunday.
It puts us on a Sunday. And so again, you just want to have those out, I think, for transparency and for public participation that you've been doing so well. Yeah. I would just want to have them out the day of the meeting, let's say, maybe as early as you could.
Okay. Let me just, while I've got you, Mr. Churchill, maybe Mr. Johnson, you might want to weigh in on this. Help me understand what you would envision the flow of the agenda to be on this. What would we do in open session? What would we, would you recommend an opening statement and then, potentially 11 sets of questions? And where does public comment come before or after in this case? And then what do we take into a closed session? How would you recommend we structure the discussion around this item on Monday? Take it from either one of you.
Mr. Churchill's been through lots of these himself, so I will defer to him.
So what I think everyone's used to that contracts with public agencies is public comments, then each of the firms in some kind of I would just, draw them out of a hat maybe or whatever, alphabetical order, opening statements, and then questions, and they don't have to be the same, right? If you've got one that you're concerned about the cap, you can ask them about that. So that's why I think, and sort of trying to have maybe one person who's asking, like you guys have done before, right? The common questions, you could have one person ask those. And then but still have okay, wait a minute, you don't have a cap on this. How do we know, given what the county just told us our budget is for legal and overall, how would this work, right? So you don't have to ask them the same questions. I think you want to do a mix of, but I would assign someone on the commission to be that lead. So we don't have 11 people trying to do an interview, right? You can imagine that would not work. Then once we get through that, we would go into closed session to discuss it and then come back out and announce without having negotiated, we don't know who's actually going to be the contractor, but you would rank them is what I would suggest. And then whoever's in first, you would tell the staff to negotiate with them and see what they can bring back very quickly. So anyway, that's how it should play out.
Okay, Commissioner McClintock, you raised your hand again a minute ago.
Yeah, just back to this idea of having a shared Google Doc for us to create these questions. Is there I guess this is a question for Mr. Churchwell, is that a issue in terms of the Brown Act if we're all collaborating on a document together out of session? Is that a problem?
As long as you can't make a decision out of session, right? You can't have a serial meeting so the thing that you should do is what we did with the 6 commissioners is that, maybe we assign one person to come up with a question, a general question, and then because you're doing interviews, you're choosing to do them in public. You don't have to, right? Remember that none of this has to be done this way at all. You can just hire somebody. So if you choose to ask okay, I have this, I'd like to ask this question, then no one has to get advance notice of that. But again, the shared Google Doc, I'm glad you brought that up because it can start looking like lawyers don't like those things at all anyway for clients. I mean, in any context because of that.
Yeah.
But would it be better if everybody emailed their questions to Ms. Tilton? She and perhaps one or two of us could then get on a call Monday morning, combine all of the common questions, kind of filter down to the list, and then assign them out in advance so that we kind of know Commissioner Katz is going to ask this one, Commissioner McClintock's going to do this one, et cetera. Would that be a better process for gathering the full range of questions, filtering it, and then dividing it up?
I think I like that a lot better. I mean, and I would just make the deadline like Friday at 5. And if you haven't figured out, you know, kind of what you want to ask by then, so at least staff would be able to
compile,
get things, you know, have it by Monday morning early.
And it would be okay in that case, as we've talked, that you know, if you're submitting a question for consideration, you could identify this is for firm A only, or firms A, B, and C, or right. We could, when we submit the question, you could indicate who you want it asked of. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
Definitely.
Mr. Twibell, I saw your hand.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, because we are going to be asking different questions. So we just submit them with the name of the person or the firm.
Of the firm. Okay. Mr. Johnson.
I just wanted to get a little clarity on what this screening thought is, because Mr. Churchill may be comfortable. I'm not sure that we'd be comfortable saying these two questions are the same or not, and then, you know, between different things submitted by commissioners. So
my recommendation there would be we pick 2 commissioners that would get on a call with your staff on Monday. You would just facilitate, but the commissioners would combine like questions and make the assignments.
Okay.
Is that more comfortable?
Definitely. Thank you.
So commissioners, anybody uncomfortable with that process? Kind of recap, by Friday end of day, we'd like you to submit to Ms. Tilton any questions you'd like to ask, indicate of whom. And then on Monday morning, we'll take a couple volunteers here in a moment, but a small team of us would get together with the staff to kind of organize the questions. Is that an acceptable process? Okay.
Yes.
Given that, I'd be happy to help with that, but are there maybe 2 others who would love to jump in and help edit? Mr. Bradley, thank you. I'll take one more. Anybody got some free time on Monday morning? Commissioner Bradley and I will do our best.
I can join you on Monday.
Great, Commissioner McClintock, and we can talk. Ms. Tilton can work with us offline to pick a time.
Great.
To do that on Monday. And then the goal would then be that by, you know, a couple hours before we gather Monday evening, that the commissioners would all receive the question set and assignments.
Quick question before you move on from that. Do you want those questions, once you have them together, to be sent to the applicants or just kept within the commission?
I don't have a feeling one way or the other. Anybody have a strong feeling? Share them or no? We don't ever share with Mr. Churchwell what we're going to ask him before in the meeting, right?
I'm glad somebody pointed that out.
Ms. Twibell, and then I'm going to come back to Ms. Turley.
I was just going to say, if they don't have the questions, that kind of gives you an idea of how they're going to communicate with you, rather than being prepared before they give an interview to you.
I like that. Very good. Ms. Turley, you had a comment earlier.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Twibell, and also I just wanted to ask Mr. Churchwell if he had any suggested questions that would be helpful that we might not have thought of.
That would be very unfair to all of these law firms. I mean, yeah, I think I'm going to stay out of that, to be honest, if you guys would be okay with that. I know all of these firms, and you know, have the highest respect for all of them. So that's, yeah, I think I'd probably be happier to stay out of the questioning.
Not to worry. Thanks, Steve.
Chair Morris, I have a question on the time slots so that I could schedule them appropriately. And did you want to do it alphabetically or random draw? How did you want to select the order?
I don't know that I have a preference on how you select them. I'm happy to leave that to you to organize. In terms of the timing, so Mr. Church will help me, or maybe Mr. Johnson from an agenda, help me with this, just think this through. I'm going to presume we will need a closed session related to potential litigation on Monday. We don't know that for sure yet, but I'm going to assume that that's going to be on the agenda. You mentioned that we'll probably go into closed session to rank the firms after we've completed the interviews. So I guess my question is, should we do those as two separate pieces? We've been trying to do the legal piece at the top of the agenda. Obviously, the interview one will have to come later. Should we combine those agenda items and do one closed session so we're only interrupting the public meeting once, or would you separate them into two blocks?
I would separate them, and there's two different exceptions, one for anticipated litigation and one for personnel. And my preference would be that the litigation be first. And it could be anywhere. It could be, but I think what would make sense is to have it at the beginning of the meeting. Okay. And then do all these other things and then have the other closed session, of course, as you said, after the interviews.
So Mr. Tilton, go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
I would ask, though, we do have the two people coming to talk about the census, one from UCSB and one from ECOP. So I would ask if the commission is comfortable with having them go first so we can let them go before we go into closed session, if that's okay with you.
Great reminder. Thank you. So do you have a sense of how long they're going to take?
I think they can shape their presentation to whatever you want. It's more how long your discussion goes. I mean, given how much you have on the agenda, I might suggest we limit that item to 30 minutes.
That's what I was hoping you were going to say. And it's obviously a discussion item we can come back to if we want to get deeper. It's not a one-timer and done kind of a conversation. So let me just thinking ahead. So if we let's assume some public comment, we do that presentation. That's probably 45 minutes to an hour. So we're at 7:15 to 7:30. I think Steve, I get your point about doing the legal piece first, but I'm almost wondering, just from a flow and the folks that are sitting in the audience, I'd almost suggest we do the interviews next, deal with that, handle whatever other agenda we've got after that, and then in this case, I'd almost say let's leave the legal piece for the very end.
That works as well.
Okay. So Ms. Tilton, it sounds like I would anticipate we would start the interviews between 7:15 and 7:30, with the caveat that public comment could take us in, much faster or much longer. It just depends on who comes that night. But that seems like our best guess. I don't know that, Commissioners, I don't know how you feel about setting a maximum time per firm for the interviews. On the one hand, I like that from a meeting management perspective. On the other hand, if commissioners have concerns they still want to dig in on, I don't necessarily want to include that examination. So, Mr. Romero.
So Chair Morris, couldn't we say limit, and if there's additional stuff, they can come back to it at the end, just in terms of managing the meeting?
We could probably always, extend it, sure. Commissioner Rios.
Maybe capping like a specific, maybe having like a vision of capping, like if we see that there are 6 questions for one of the firms, and then we see that there's only 2 for the other one, like how long are we willing to go? Like maybe we only want to go, if we can stick to 20 or 25 minutes per try to stick to that. If we see that there is more for one, then we kind of have this understanding that one might take longer than the other two. I don't know if that gives us.
No, I think you make good sense. So maybe from a time budgeting and trying to forecast for the interviewees, we're capping the interviews at 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And I think Commissioner Rios is right. I think we may find that one is shorter and others are longer. Who knows? We'll see when we get your questions.
Did you want to have a cap for the opening statement? So they
yes, absolutely. And my suggestion would be short, 2-3 minutes. Commissioner McClintock's given me 3, so.
Would you like me to give them a heads up to prepare for 3 minutes opening statement?
I'd tell them to prepare for 2, and we'll maybe give them a little bit of leeway if they need 2.5. Anybody?
Fine by me.
We've read their proposal. I think this needs to just be a quick introduction. I'd say 2 minutes is enough. Okay. Ms. Hilton, do you feel like you have enough to put this meeting together for us?
Yes, I do.
All right. Commissioner Twibell, I saw your hand.
Yeah, my question is, would we say how many people can represent the firm in the interview? So if Strom, Wasser, and Witcher has all these people, are we just saying only one of the lead team leaders can be the representative? Or do you want the team leaders that they've designated to be able to speak?
I think that's up to them, right? I mean, that's part of the interview process.
Mm-hmm.
That's a timing factor, though. That's what I was wondering.
I can tell you when I asked availability, I asked for those that they had assigned for the lead and got responses back from more than one on several of the firms, except for Rafferty's.
Mr. Curley?
Yeah, in particular with Nielsen Merksimer, I would definitely want to be able to speak with someone who wasn't the lead if we were asking questions about conflict of interest. So I don't want to preclude them from providing that information directly from the source.
So maybe ask them to identify who the lead is, but recognize that they may need to call in a team member to answer a particular question. Commissioner Katz.
So that's kind of what I wanted to dig into, is the conflict of interest. And can we be very open about asking them what this issue of conflict of interest is? I mean, this is new to me, so I need a little coaching here.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Churchwell, but I don't see any problem with asking. I think there were 2 issues raised around that. One was the PAC representation, and the other was the request for exclusion from the policy. Those seem to be the 2 concerns that I heard. Maybe there was a third one that I missed, but I think you could ask about those specifically. Absolutely. Mr. Curley?
Yeah, just to clarify, I think there was also contributions to the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, so I actually think those, I think
that's
the same that in the pack of the same thing.
Okay.
But we should clarify that. That's a great
right.
Yeah.
That. So yes, Commissioner Katz, I think, be as specific as you think you need in the question. You're right.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're good on that. Anybody else have anything related to the independent legal counsel process at this point? Got some homework to do again. All right, with that, we'll move to agenda item number 9 and 10, future agenda items. Again, our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, the 1st of February. Following that, we would be looking to meet on, this is again another, once we set a rule, we're going to pick exceptions to it. So our next normally scheduled meeting would be on February the 15th, but I believe the county clarified last time that we're closed that week. So I think we talked about going to the 22nd. Is that what, am I remembering that right? Okay.
Yes.
So those are the next two
because of the holiday
booked meetings. Other than the items that are already on the future agenda list, is there anything that anybody needs to add to one of those agendas? Mr. Johnson.
Just one thing, just to let the commissioners know, we'll talk about this either the 1st or probably the 15th. The Census Bureau said today that the data that you'll need is going to be released July 30th at the earliest.
Wow.
So we have a lot of time before the data.
A lot of time to get ready for not a lot of time after that.
We'll come back to you with a whole report on what can be done between now and then and things like that. But just to let you know, that word came out of the Census Bureau just this morning.
For sharing that. Anybody else have an item to add to a future agenda? Seeing none, unless there's something for the good of the order. Ms. Turley.
Just checking in, did we want to discuss possibly sending out a letter of interest request for other demographers in the case of catastrophe, or have we tabled that?
Great clarification. So the county has already put out the request for statements of interest. So we've not asked for proposals, but we have asked them to create a list of people who might want to submit a proposal if we decide we need one at some point in the future. And I believe, Ms. Anderson can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the deadline for responses is next week.
Okay.
So at our meeting on Monday, we should know whether anybody has expressed an interest.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, folks, I will wish you all a great evening, and we will adjourn tonight's meeting.
Thanks.